Hi there, you're watching All 24 News World News Program. I'm Krifa Zachary and here are tonight's top stories. Heavy Zionist bombing kills dozens in Gaza. Tel Sultan is on the brink and urgent calls for action to save those under siege in the south. Coming up next, Moroccan activists warn of deep Zionist infiltration into state institutions and looming threats to food security. Also in our news, Algeria and Ethiopia strengthen trade ties, new fertilizer deals, fresh investments, and a joint committee to boost energy security. And US-Russia talks kick off in Riyadh. Moscow hints at common ground with Washington, while Kiev calls discussion fruitful and purposeful. This and more shortly. Good evening, it's great to have you with us tonight. We begin our program with Gaza, where the death toll keeps climbing. At least 51 Palestinians have been killed since dawn on Monday as Zionist warplanes pounded the strip. Over 25 air raids targeted Khan Yunis alone, while relentless shelling struck homes and shelters across Gaza. 7 were killed in strikes on El Maghrika or El Maghraqa and a Nusayrat refugee camp, while 5 displaced civilians died when a shelter school was hit. In Khan Yunis, 6 perished after a tent housing families was bombed. More airstrikes on Gaza City and the north claimed at least 10 lives, including a child. More casualties were reported in Shujaiya, Zaytun, and near Tawam Junction, where 4 were killed and 9 others wounded.
They bombed the house without any warning, which led to the martyrdom of 6 people from Baker's family and 3 from Said's, including my uncle, his wife, and their young son. What can we say? God is sufficient for us, and He's the best disposer of affairs.
We demand security and safety. What good is food without it? For our children, our boys, our young ones, and our adults, we want safety, like all the people of the world, those who live in peace and security. But we do not. We want to be like them. They have deprived us of our children and youth. Our homes were completely destroyed. Each family had only a room and a bathroom. The house, including all 4 floors, was bombed. Even the rubble from our neighbor's house, which was also bombed, fell on us.
Over in Khan Yunis, sources at Nasser Medical Complex report a Zionist airstrike killed 2 Palestinians, including a minor, inside the hospital overnight Sunday. Their bodies were pulled from the rubble of the surgery department where they had undergone operations. Several patients and medical staff were wounded in what sources call a deliberate attack, forcing the department out of service.
On this blessed night of Ramadan, the Israeli occupier violated all international laws and humanitarian principles by targeting the surgical services at the Nasser Hospital complex. The attack led to the martyrdom of an injured man who had been brought there a few days ago due to previous strikes. Additionally, the attack resulted in numerous injuries among both the medical staff and the patients.
And this very Zionist airstrike on Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis sparked outrage. Residents are demanding urgent protection for Gaza's medical facilities. Zara Ferjani has more in this report.
Flames lit up the night sky as yet another Zionist strike hit the heart of Khan Yunis. This time the target was the Nasser Medical Complex, one of Gaza's largest and most vital healthcare facilities. A missile struck in the dead of night, directly hitting the emergency and surgical wards. Panic spread instantly. Patients, doctors, and medical staff were thrown into chaos as the hospital's core services were reduced to rubble.
انضرب صاروخ مباشر على الدور
The
الثاني.
missile directly hit the second floor of emergency building. It also hit the mall surgical ward. And as you can see, the unit was completely destroyed. 90% of the patients were transported safely. But there are martyrs and wounded. Some patients had just come out of surgery. Many saw their conditions deteriorate due to the damage and shock of the Zionist strikes.
The attack has triggered growing demands from the people of Gaza, who say that even hospitals are no longer safe, despite international humanitarian law explicitly prohibiting such strikes.
فجأة ما بنستأمن وإحنا قاعدين بأمان الله يعني
We were surprised by a missile that fell on us. It was a dark dust, stones, and shattered glass rained down. Just half an hour after the operation, my relative's condition worsened. He couldn't breathe, his wound reopened, and he started bleeding again. We are asking for protection, at least in hospitals. But even that doesn't exist anymore.
يعني وكمان فيش إلنا أمان في المستشفى.
للقصف اليوم على مجمع ناصر الطبي.
Today's strike and the shutdown of our operating rooms send a clear message. The occupation wants to silence the Nasser Medical Complex. I can confirm it's one of the largest, if not the largest, hospitals still functioning in Gaza. We only resumed operations in May after a previous shutdown.
This is far from the first attack on Nasser Hospital. Since the beginning of the Zionist genocide, Gaza's hospitals, once safe havens, have been systematically targeted, crippled, and shut down. The Nasser Medical Complex, a lifeline for thousands, is now once again in the crosshairs, another chapter in the Zionist campaign of destruction and extermination.
For its part, the Health Ministry says 61 were killed and 134 were wounded in the last 24 hours since March 18th. Zionist strikes have claimed 730 lives and injuring over 1,300. The overall toll is a staggering 50,082 dead, with more than 113,000 wounded. Meanwhile, many are still buried beneath the rubble, waiting to be pulled out. And in Rafah, families in Tel Sultan are trapped under relentless bombardment for over 36 hours, and their fate remains unknown. Contact was lost with the rescue teams who were sent there to help the wounded. Local officials call it a full-fledged genocide, slamming global silence and demanding urgent intervention to protect civilians and relieve crews.
حتى هذه اللحظة نتحدث على عدم قدرتنا على التواصل معهم.
Up until this moment, we have been unable to establish any communication with them. There's no contact whatsoever, leaving the fate of the civil defense crews, approximately 16 service providers, completely unknown. We have no information about their condition, and their fate will remain uncertain unless there is international intervention. The ongoing international silence regarding these individuals, who are dedicated to serving others, is deeply concerning. Why are they being treated this way? Their lives are now in grave danger. Moreover, over 50,000 civilians currently in the Rafah area face imminent threats. The world must awaken to this crisis and fulfill its responsibilities toward the people of Gaza.
To international reactions now, Doctors Without Borders warns of the largest wave of forced displacement in the occupied West Bank in decades. The group's latest report highlights the destruction of camps and the displacement of thousands, leaving Palestinians homeless and without basic services or health care, in an increasingly dire humanitarian situation. Meanwhile, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas is calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and a return to negotiations. Speaking in occupied Al-Quds, she warned that the ceasefire's collapse has fueled heavy civilian casualties and stressed the urgent need for humanitarian aid. Kallas reaffirmed further that a two-state solution remains the only viable path to lasting peace.
Resuming negotiations is the only feasible way to end the suffering on all sides. Violence feeds more violence. What we are witnessing now is a dangerous escalation. It is causing unbearable uncertainty for the hostages and their families, and it is likewise causing horror and death for the Palestinian people. The fundamental steps here are restating the ceasefire, ensuring the release of all hostages, and resuming the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza with the goal of a permanent ceasefire. The European Union can help, whether through restating our Rafah border crossing mission or providing more humanitarian assistance.
And finally, in this file, Zionist forces continue their assault on Tulkarm and its camp for the 57th straight day, forcing hundreds of families to flee, among them Talib Abu Sariya, one of many civilians caught in the relentless raids. Yasin Rikti has more on his story.
In the occupied West Bank, thousands of displaced Palestinians are struggling to find a sense of normalcy during the month of Ramadan. Among them is Talib Abu Sariya, forced to take refuge in a school with his wife after the Zionist forces demolished their home in Tulkarm's refugee camp.
The pain we feel is indescribable. Look at any displaced person and you will see no joy, even during Ramadan, a time meant for family reunions, brotherhood and celebration.
Abu Sariya and his wife now rely on charity kitchens like the Yasser Arafat Takiya, which provides iftar meals to the displaced and needy families.
Our target groups are the poor, the needy, and families who can no longer meet their daily needs, especially now, with so many displaced again.
But no amount of assistance can replace what Abu Sariya has lost: his home, his memories, his sense of belonging.
Visiting my demolished home felt like my soul was leaving my body. I stood there, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. Memories of my parents, my brothers, my family, all reduced to rubble. I collapsed. I couldn't bear it. I don't want blankets or anything else. I just want to sit on ruins of my home. My soul will only return when I do.
Since the start of the Zionist military operation in January, tens of thousands of Palestinians have been forcibly displaced. Now, in the holiest month of the year, their ordeal continues. Ramadan under occupation, under siege, without home or refuge.
Shifting to Yemen now, the Houthi group says a US airstrike hit the capital Sana'a Sunday night, killing at least 4 and wounding many others. 2 more raids struck Sahar and Sakai near Sada in the north. The American strikes entered their 10th day without any sign of stopping. They are part of a campaign by US President Donald Trump, the group, or targeting the group, while also trying to pressure Iran. Turning to North Africa now. In Morocco, anti-normalization activists are ramping up calls for resistance, branding it a national duty. At a symposium, Aziz Hanawi, head of the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization, warned that Zionist influence is creeping into politics, the economy, culture, and media, enabled by local collaborators advancing normalization.
مواجهة المشروع الصهيوني مصلحة وطنية.
Confronting the Zionist project is a national interest and fundamentally a national duty. Even for those who do not see it as a duty, at the very least it remains a national interest. The Zionist project infiltrates our national fabric, our state, our relationship with our state, our institutions, and the constitutional foundation of our governmental institutions. Parliament, municipalities, public policies, concepts, educational programs, culture, media, the entire societal structure is infiltrated by Zionism. This is a vast and extensive issue on its own. The Zionist project and its agents in Morocco are working on a 4-pronged target agenda to justify normalization as a gateway to Zionization. It's no longer just about normalization. Rather, you are now required to embrace Zionization in order to maintain relations with America and Israel.
Similarly, Ahmed Wiham, head of the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization, is sounding the alarm on what he calls a Zionization project in Morocco. In a Facebook statement, he accused the Makhzen of seizing land from the people and handed it over to Zionists under the pretext of investment. Wiham warned that this threatens Morocco's demographic, political, and cultural identity, and also questioning the silence of sovereign institutions as Zionist influence deepens. And in the same context, Moroccan activists are raising alarm over the country's growing dependence on the Zionist entity in agriculture. Mohamed Naji, a leader in the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization, warned that normalization is eroding Morocco's food security, with Zionist companies now dominating agricultural production. He revealed that more than 80% of vegetable seeds used in the kingdom originate from Zionist sources, calling it a major threat to national sovereignty. Moving on to the Western Sahara file, Algeria has slammed the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, for turning a blind eye to human rights violations in the occupied Sahrawi territories. Addressing the UN Security Council, Algeria's representative, Amar Ben Jama, expressed shock at the mission's silence on ongoing humanitarian abuses under Moroccan occupation.
When it comes to MINURSO, for example, we have been surprised and astonished by their silence. This attitude sent the message, the signal that MINURSO, as a strange exception among all UN peace operations deployed in Africa, should simply turn a blind eye to the human rights situation in the territory.
Algeria's UN representative Amar Bajama called for stronger UN-AU cooperation and peace support missions across Africa. Let's take a listen.
We insist on a stronger cooperation between the UN and the regional organization, particularly the African Union, which is a reliable partner in this regard.
And in economy news, and as you followed in our headlines, Algeria has reaffirmed its commitment to supplying Ethiopia with fertilizers, particularly urea, to help meet its annual demand of 2 million tons. In talks held in Addis Ababa, Algerian Energy Minister Mohamed Arqab and Ethiopian Trade Minister Kassaum Goufi explored deeper trade ties, focusing on energy, mining, and renewables. Ethiopia also expressed interest in Algeria's expertise in energy regulation, electricity grid expansion, and petroleum trade. Both sides agreed to form a joint working group to push forward renewable energy projects and infrastructure development. Elsewhere in neighboring Libya, the country is taking a step toward resolving its political deadlock. Deputy Presidential Council Chairman Abdullah Al-Lafi has announced the launch of national dialogue sessions, bringing together political leaders, lawmakers, academics, legal experts, and international representatives. The goal is to find a path to stability and a lasting solution to the crisis. Moving on to the war in Ukraine, U.S. and Russian officials began direct talks in Riyadh on Monday to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz told CBS the meetings aim to secure a ceasefire in the Black Sea. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, expressed optimism, suggesting a partial truce could pave the way for a broader ceasefire. Both sides of the conflict have put forward different proposals for temporary ceasefires, but cross-border attacks have continued unabated. In a related development, the Kremlin announced a joint Russian-American understanding on a potential settlement to end the war in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the agreement depends on resolving technical issues, which are the focus of ongoing negotiations in Riyadh, including the Black Sea Shipping Security Initiative.
In the first place, it is about the safety of ship navigation. But if you remember its initiative previous form, all of its aspects, there was a rather large part about obligations towards our country that were not fulfilled last time. So this will also be on the agenda today.
The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov also affirmed Russia's commitment to halting the attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure and energy facilities despite Kiev's continued strikes on Russian energy targets.
So far, there have been no other orders from the president. Our armed forces are following all instructions of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, but of course we are monitoring the situation very closely.
On the Ukrainian side, Ukrainian Defense Minister Rostam Umerov described the Riyadh talks between Washington and Kiev as fruitful, emphasizing that discussions focused on a truce to halt attacks on energy facilities as a first step. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of prolonging the war and called for pressure on Vladimir Putin to halt airstrikes. In a Sunday address, he warned that without such pressure, Moscow would continue to reject diplomacy and take lives. His remarks came ahead of US-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia on a partial ceasefire.
Today, U.S. representatives spoke with the war team, with the representatives of Russia, and again a meeting of the Ukrainian and American teams. I'm expecting a new report. We need a movement towards real peace, towards guaranteed security. This is necessary for everyone, in Ukraine, for Europe, for America, and for all those in the world who seek stability in international relations.
And now it's time to catch up on more news stories making headlines around the world in the News in Brief with Sofian Kanturi.
As Moscow and Kiev exchanged drone strikes on energy facilities, talks in Riyadh aimed at potential partial ceasefire were underway. Amid this insane, a Russian attack on civilian homes left 28 people, including 4 children, injured. In response, Russia's defense ministry reported repelling a Ukrainian drone and HIMARS missile strike in Crimea and stopping an infiltration attempt in Belgorod, highlighting the ongoing military escalation during the talks. Chad described the statement made by Sudanese Army Deputy Commander Yasser al-Atta as a declaration of war, emphasizing its rights to defend itself. In a statement on Monday, Chad's Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned al-Atta's remarks, which included direct threats to the security and safety of Chad's territory, warning that these statements lead to a dangerous escalation in the region.
Not as what he pretends we are.
Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney called for early elections on April 18th, seeking a strong mandate to deal with the threat from Donald Trump. Carney confirmed that the Governor-General representing the British Commonwealth in Canada had approved his request to dissolve Parliament and called for early elections, enabling him to confront US President Trump, who had threatened to make Canada the 51st US state. In South Korea, the Constitutional Court cancelled the National Assembly's decision to remove Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, reinstating him as acting president. Han Duck-soo has served as acting president after President Yoon was ousted by the National Assembly for imposing martial law on December 3rd, which sparked a major political crisis.
And with this, we reach the end of our program. For more updates or to catch up on any part you missed, our social media platforms are under your service. From me and the rest of the team, thank you for keeping it here on our channel. Until next time, have a good one.